So it has been over a year since Pokemon TCG Pocket, a simplified digital version of the Pokemon trading card game, released to the public. I made a video about it last year close to the time it released, but what has changed between now and then? Well, first let's recap. Pokemon TCG Pocket is a digital client for a virtual simplified version of the Pokemon trading card game. The client itself functions as a hub where you could crack packs to try to obtain rare cards, show off your collection to friends or the wider internet, and of course participate in online matches. The client itself launched in a pretty robust state. There was a lot of things to do when booting up the game, 3 packs to open on launch, and most of the features that are here today were present back then, aside from trading and ranked battles of course. The UI also remained relatively unchanged from the way it was at launch. How was actually playing the game itself, you may ask? Well, that's where the issues come in. From an actual play standpoint, the game itself was fine. The cards worked the way that they were intended, and due to the smaller, more compact nature of the modified rule set, games actually went by fairly fast. You weren't trying to find the right balance between energies and important cards, you just got to attach one per turn for free, from a separate zone. Decks only had 20 cards, and you only needed to knock out 2 or 3 Pokemon to win, so what's the problem? Well, dear viewer, this isn't easy for me to say, but it's time to sit you down and for us to have a long conversation about coin flip meta. You see, when I published my first video on the subject, the game was new and people were still labbing out the best decks. It didn't take them long to realize that the best thing you could be doing is testing your luck every turn with insane high roller plays and building your deck around that. If you were winning in Pokemon TCG Pocket, you might as well go buy a lottery ticket because most of your success in these early days was determined by dumb luck. There's this card, Misty, that allows you to flip coins until you land on tails. For each heads, attach a water energy from your energy pile into one of your Pokemon. Here's the thing, not only was that the most powerful way of getting energy onto the field, despite everything, it was also the most consistent way of getting energies on board. So most people just played water decks. You had no reason not to. There were a few decks that came to counteract this, namely Zard and Pikachu, but even those decks relied a good deal on coin flips. For Zard, it used Moltres to get things going, and Pikachu used Zapdos to deal up to 200 damage while Pikachu was setting up. They weren't as reliant on them as Water Turbo, but if you wanted to play a more low-to-the-ground skill-based deck, you weren't left with many options. It was a meta that, while yes, could be fun at times, was definitely hard to take seriously as a competitor. It was great for farming clips on YouTube, but there was hardly any skill being expressed here. This lasted through the second set as well. Mythical Island. Its top deck was also a coin flip strategy. It wasn't until the third set, Space Time Smackdown, that they really fixed this issue. Let me tell you, Space Time meta was a breath of fresh air. It power crept the coin flip decks in such a way that they were still viable, but no longer the top dogs anymore. While decks like Palkia still used the tools old water decks were using to boost its engine, there were decks like Darkrai, both Poison Control and Magnezone, that could counteract it and didn't run any coin flip cards. Dialga was a good card for ramping up steel decks with its attack that allowed you to attach to energy for free and deal 30 damage. This, in my opinion, is when the game really came into its own. Yes, there was a more defined metagame and people knew what was good and what was bad, but at the same time, there was a lot of room for creativity. Decks and deck variants weren't set in stone as you'd believe. You see, there could be 20 cards per deck, which means that you will have to make some tough cuts when deck building. Let me put it like this. At this time, there were 3 cards in the game that would make your deck more consistent, universally speaking. Those cards being Professor's Research, which lets you draw 2 cards from your deck, Pokeball, which searched a random basic Mon from your deck, and Pokemon Communications, which allowed you to exchange 1 Mon from your hand for a random one in your deck. These can be run at 2 copies apiece, but if your deck is operating at full consistency, that's 6 spots out of your 20 cards. Those 20 cards include your Pokemon as well. Those cards not only being the staple cards you can run, by the way. There's Leaf and X-Speed for easy retreating, Cyrus and Sabrina for switching out your opponent's Pokemon, Meowth that could draw you a card. What about healing? Are you going to throw Potion into your deck? Be aware that this also has to share space with the deck's engines as well. Decks like Magnezone and Darkrai have a 10-card suite just for the Pokemon they'd run over the course of the game. Deck building was tight, which made even going up against decks of the same variety something to where you were never sure how things were going to actually play out. This would only become more pronounced as more cards got introduced into the card pool. The next 2 sets, Triumphant Light and Shining Revelry, wouldn't make a huge splash into the game at large, but did introduce a few cards that shook up the metagame at the time. Triumphant Light gave us Arita, a 40 HP heal card if you were running water energies, as well as Sudowoodo, a 1 prize card meant to steep early game pressure onto opponents running EX Mon. Leafeon EX would also be a card that would get revisited whenever a grass deck would see some viability, and Crobat Shot would become a solid mid-game sweeper later on. Shining Revelry would also give us Garantina EX to see immediate success with its ability allowing it to stack energies for free by ending your turn. Pair that with Darkrai EX for some early game damage while you set up, and it makes for one powerful and consistent strategy. This set also introduced a new version of Charizard that would become great later on and completely did away with coin flipping altogether. On top of that, it added Pokemon Center and Red to the pool of staples. The game would receive its second major shift with the release of the set called Celestial Guardian. This set changed the entire way we thought about the game. The set centered around the Alolan Box legendaries Solgaleo and Lunala, but sped up the game significantly by making the top decks something that quickly was able to tear through Garantina's stall strategy and get going rather fast. Solgaleo would be a 2-stage Pokemon with a 2-for-120 attack that could switch itself into the active spot for free. Another card that was introduced in this set was Rare Candy, a card ripped directly from the actual TCG, which allowed you to skip the middle stage of evolution and jump straight to the final stage, which means that Solgaleo was ready to go in a matter of 2 turns, getting devastating damage in while other decks were still setting up. Another card that you have to consider is Orocorio. This card can completely blank damage from EX Mons, which most decks were running exclusively. This did mean that whatever you made would have to include some sort of one-prizer Mon, just to make sure that your strategy wasn't completely dead when you ran into that thing on the ladder. Oh, and Solgaleo wasn't the only one making use of Rare Candy. Rare Candy being introduced breathed new life into strategies that took a lot of time to ramp up because fully evolving your Star Mon would take 3 turns. Shining Revelry's Charizard, as mentioned earlier, would begin to see a lot more play, being able to do 150 damage by turn 3 among other decks. It's a card that made a lot of decks that struggled for the time being for being too slow into powerhouses that you have to have a strategy for. The game was in a pretty good place after this. There were 5 major sets after Celestial Guardians, each adding their own spin on the meta, as well as throwing a couple staple cards in for good measure. Extra Dimensional Crisis added the Ultra Beast in Silvally, a deck that's still a top contender even today with how quick it could get off the ground, while dealing great damage with a one-prizer card. The Buzzwole strategy was also really fun, even if sometimes it did feel like Solgaleo's strategy with extra steps. Eevee Grove introduced Sylveon EX, which became a reliable draw engine as it was Professor's research on a body. Flareon EX allows you to attach an energy from grave at the cost of 20 HP, making it able to deal 130 by turn 2, as well as introducing my favorite deck in the game thus far, Sweets Relay, a deck that revolves around a single move present on multiple Pokemon. Sweets Relay, which gets more powerful if you've used it before, the strategy culminating in the Pokemon Alcremie with a move called Sweets Overload, dealing 40 damage for each time you've used Relay over the course of the game. It was really fun. Wisdom of Sea and Sky is where I fell off the game personally, not for any negative reasons, I just didn't have much time to keep up with it as I'd like. That being said, this introduced cards like Espeon EX, a mid-range attack that could heal 30 damage each turn, but one that pairs really well with Sylveon EX, as well as base Sylveon and Espeon. Donphan EX was also a powerhouse this format, and it can deal an extra 60 damage if it has 2 extra energy attacks. That paired really well with the fighting type's insane amount of resources it had accumulated over the course of various sets, which allowed it to hit way above its weight class. Lugia and Ho-Oh were an iconic pair around this time too. The 2 Pokemon that were meant to be played in tandem with each other, as Ho-Oh's attack provides the necessary energy for Lugia to get off the ground. Secluded Springs followed after, and it introduced cards like Poliwrath, which can hit for 140 damage if one of the energies attached happened to be a water energy. You also had Jumpluff, which gets a free switch upon attacking, Cursola, which has the chance of knocking out a Pokemon upon going down, and of course, Suicune, a Mon that has a 2-cost attack that does 20 damage for each Pokemon on both benches, and draws you a card at the end of each turn. Okay, so the Pokemon TCG Pocket video was supposed to come out in October or November. It's January. I'm just gonna have to make some addendums to keep it current. Mega Rising released in September of 2025 and brought with it the titular Mega Evolution Pokemon. Pokemon that are very powerful, but if they're knocked out, you lose on the spot. In this format, Mega Blaziken was a top contender, with a 2-for-120 attack that can be online by turn 2, and plenty of backup to support it, such as the Lily card, which keeps it alive, and Flame Patch to get it online even faster, or recover lost energy that you had to discard from its attack. Mega Altaria had an attack that accumulates damage the more Pokemon you have on your bench. Mega Gyarados hits hard with a powerful 140 attack that, while takes a while to set up, it also mills 3 cards from your opponent's deck. Mega Absol is also a great control strategy, being able to hand-rip valuable supporters from your opponent and force them into a long control game. It pairs really well with Hydreigon for high damage plays or Darkrai and Dawn for chip damage. Crimson Blaze is the newest set at time of release. It introduced introduces Mega Charizard Y to the game. This continues the tradition of Charizard having high damage attacks, as this one does 250 damage at the cost of 50 damage recoil. If used on a Mega Pokemon, that's game on the spot. Outside of this new addition, the meta largely remains unchanged from the Mega Rising format. Unlike the coin flip meta we began with, it seems to be a highly skill-based meta, centered around preserving your crucial pieces and knowing when to pull them out or retreat them for later use. Pokemon TCG Pocket is one of the most finely balanced games I think I've ever seen. We've had two frustrating metas at the game's launch, but once Space Time was released, it became one of the funnest competitive experiences I've had all year. Every match feels like it really does come down to that last card. Rarely do I ever feel like I'm just steamrolling or getting steamrolled myself. Each set always introduces something new to the table without ever invalidating the old. It's a much lower powered version of the TCG proper, so it does often come down to the very precise wording on cards and how they differ from each other. That is going to be the deciding factor on whether or not they go in your deck, which I really like. Cyrus being released doesn't completely shut down or invalidate Sabrina. They both have their strengths and weaknesses despite having similar effects. It's because of this that decks from older formats can still make an impact months later. I was surprised to find out that when I booted up the game amid Secluded Springs format after a month of absence, I was still able to rack up wins with my old Solgaleo deck. It's because the team behind this game are very deliberate when it comes to power scaling. How much should a move do? How much should a move cost? What does a good move look like in this game? What should you be able to get out of a supporter? All of these are questions that are accounted for in such a way that the game feels like it's progressing, but not so far that it's alienating. I came from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Buster, if you miss a format or two in that game, you're going to be so lost when you try to come back. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a game that's friendly to newcomers or returning players. Even Pokemon TCG proper has this problem sometimes. So the fact that the game has managed to walk this fine line between sets having enough new that matches don't get stale, but not so much that everything you learned is invalidated is honestly impressive. I could count a total of one format in this game that I can actually say I didn't care for. And no, it's not the coin flip ones. Those were entertaining in a dumb fun kind of way. I couldn't take them seriously, but hey, I got to do this, so I'm not complaining. No, it was actually Shining Revelry format that I didn't particularly care for too much, but it's not like the game was unfun during that format or anything. It's just a lot of the new cards in that set didn't really shake up the game all too drastically, at least at launch. Even with that said, the old ones that did are still being used to this day. So I can't even call that a bad format, just one I didn't care for. Pokemon TCG Pocket is a great game. One that I hope has a long life ahead of it. The first year of this game is honestly something that I'm really glad to have been a part of. Matches are fun and intense, the collecting aspect of the game is addictive, and I always enjoy showing off my favorite cards to friends, even if I haven't updated my binder in a while. If you haven't played this game, I honestly recommend it now more than ever. It's easier than you think to learn the game, and knowledge that you collect and time that you spend will not feel wasted as you move on to later formats. That'll do for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. How are you guys liking the rebranded content so far? It's been a year-long project and I've actually got some stuff in the works that you're not going to want to miss, so subscribe if you already haven't. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video, whatever that may be.